Well, our international affairs commentator Doug Herbert is with me here on set. Doug, Trump threatening Iran with speed and violence, to use his words, hinting at this possible attack. But what does Trump want, and how is the Iran responding to it?
The easy and honest answer, Stuart, is I don't know, you don't know. I would suspect that Donald Trump himself might not know either. He has not done, to say the least, a strategic deep dive when it comes to the thinking out, how this all plays out. We do know that Donald Trump, with respect to these threats, these ramped up, escalating threats against Iran, has been all over the place, right? A few weeks ago, the threats he was making pertaining to a possible attack had to do with coming potentially to the aid of Iran's protesters. You remember at the time it was the height of the anti-government rallies. We were having reports out of Iran, even before and during the internet blackout there, of security forces basically massacring, firing on these protesters, with hundreds, thousands, and now since the death toll, it's emerged, is even much larger than originally thought. So at that time, it was about helping the protesters, the U.S. coming to their aid. Possibly the talk was, is this a bid at regime change? We didn't know. Now it's all being reframed, or at least refocused, in terms of these nuclear objectives. We do know that there have been these sort of attempts, these bids at negotiations, which apparently between the U.S. and Iran indirectly over its nuclear program, right? The forever question. And they have not gone well. They have not just stalled, but they apparently have come to naught. Hence, we have now this ramping up of the rhetoric. What's interesting here is, no, you don't have the protesters involved in these latest threats. You have clearly mostly nuclear demands, right? Stop enriching uranium, Trump is saying. Limit the range and the number of your ballistic missiles. This is a concern particularly to Israel, which engaged in a 12-day war back in June, you'll remember, in which Iran retaliated with missiles aimed at Israel. The U.S. intervened briefly, hit 3 Iranian nuclear sites at the time. And also, stop your support. This is another demand. Stop your support, Iran, of your proxy militias throughout the Mideast region, i.e. Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis in Yemen. These are all the formal demands. But when you ask me, what does he want? Does he want regime change? Does he want to help the protesters, which weren't mentioned this time around? Does he want to just strike at more nuclear sites? Does he want a mixture of all of the above? We don't really know, but we do know it's another shiny object. It's escalation at a time that takes our eyes off what's been going on in Minneapolis. We're not talking about that anymore. And we're also not talking about the Epstein files anymore. I'm not saying it's deliberately staged to distract people and change their attention, but it is effectively doing that. So it's really keep your eye on the ball. We don't know yet.
The mission of the protesters, Doug, I mean, it almost seems as though he doesn't care about them anymore. Perhaps that's too strong a words, but I mean, it's one way of looking at it, doesn't it?
One way of looking at it is Trump, I hate saying it again and again and again, transactional, right? Impulsive, transactional. He does what works for him in the moment, okay? In the moment, the protesters were a good, shiny object to hold up. They worked. He was able to, in a sense, instrumentalize these radical protests as a way of showing the U.S., of projecting U.S. strength and showing the U.S. is, quote, there for them, ready to come to their aid. Whether or not he really meant it, how heartfelt he was about protecting the protesters and all of that, you could perhaps judge by the fact that it wasn't mentioned in his last Truth Social posts. Does that mean that ultimately, if there is some sort of military intervention, if we don't know yet, but if there is, does it not mean that perhaps, okay, it won't end up helping the protesters by perhaps removing the regime, toppling the top leaders? Sure. It could, but it is, I think, an ominous signal or a meaningful signal that they were not explicitly mentioned yesterday, at least, Wednesday, in his first Truth Social post, where he raised the nuclear specter again and said, come to the table and negotiate, or else. If you're a protester in Iran who might have actually embraced that initial message, yes, saying, wow, the U.S. is there for us, you might be wondering now, what about us? Wasn't it about us a few weeks ago? So, yeah, left out of the equation. And I'll say left out of the equation at a time when human rights groups are getting more and more evidence day after day, Stuart, based on photos and videos and hospital records and eyewitness accounts that the toll the death toll from this atrocious, brutal government crackdown in Iran is far higher than originally thought. Some people are now saying it could even surpass what happened with China and the Tiananmen Square crackdown back in 1989.
Yeah, I mean, we're seeing some of the images now, in fact, while you're talking, Doug. I mean, it does seem as though it was an awful lot larger than the official figures, which I think stand at around 6,000 at the moment. Some people even mentioning figures of 50,000 potentially.
Yeah, 50,000 is, I guess, high end, but who knows, right? Human rights groups, their initial low end estimates now, low end is at least 10,000, at least 10,000. I believe still as of today, the official Iranian estimate of how many have been killed by the security forces is just over 3,000. I think it's around 3,100. What the reports that are emerging, I said a lot of it is video footage on social media, very hard to patch together because of the internet blackout, which is now, Stuart, I think in its 21st day, it's been 3 weeks now, that essentially communications, easy communications have been shut out, making reporters' job of piecing evidence together much harder. But like I said, photos are coming out of morgues, from hospitals. We're getting more and more reports out of the hospitals in these eyewitness reports, speaking of gunshots, often to the head, to the torso, to the eyes, punctured eye sockets, stuff like that. That suggests deliberate, lethal use of force. Deliberate, lethal use of force. Not aiming at the legs, not aiming at just shooting not to kill, but with the intent to kill. Snipers on rooftops. Sometimes just, shoot, scatter shooting everywhere. These are the types of reports that are emerging. And this is just the beginning of the story. We still have perhaps only a fraction of the full picture, and we'll perhaps never have the full picture. But like I said, this is shaping up to be, and we have to say it with caution because we don't have that full picture yet, and a lot more evidence still has to come forward, but shaping up to be perhaps the deadliest assault, not just in Iran in decades, since really the 1980s when the new Islamic theocracy was consolidating its power, snuffing out dissent and opponents, not just within Iran, but almost anywhere. I mentioned the China Tiananmen example before, but you can almost look anywhere where you see at least 10,000 citizens, protesters wiped out by a regime trying to crush dissent. That's really almost unprecedented in modern memory.